Welcome to the Fast Mode podcast series. I'm Tara Nil, and with me today is Andrew Coward, GM of Software Defined Networking at IBM. IBM is a leading provider of global hybrid cloud and AI and consulting expertise. The company helps clients in more than 175 countries capitalize on insights from their data, streamline business processes, reduce costs, and gain the competitive edge in their industries. More than 4,000 government and corporate entities in critical infrastructure areas such as financial services, telecommunications, and healthcare rely on IBM's hybrid cloud platform and Red Hat OpenShift to effect their digital transformations quickly, efficiently, and securely. Andrew has more than 25 years of experience in telecommunications and networking and has held executive management positions in Brocade, Juniper, Carrier IQ, and Unisphere in network engineering, product management, strategy, sales, and marketing. Prior to joining IBM, Andrew was CEO of Lumina Networks, an open source networking vendor focused on SDN solutions. Andrew joins us as part of our exclusive editorial segment on generative AI for network management. Welcome, Andrew. Great to have you on today's episode.
And great to be with you, Tara.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great. Let's begin. We're going to talk about one of the most interesting topics, for this year, which is generative AI. Let's call it GenAI. So, I guess that for IBM, you guys have looked at it from three perspectives: the data layer, the analytics layer, and the automation layer. So, do you want to tell us what role does GenAI play at each of these layers? And then also perhaps provide some examples for those layers.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously IBM's been in the AI business for quite a while now, from the days of Jeopardy and so on. So our aim in AI just generally is to kind of go solve the business problems. I think for the most part, we're seeing the industry come up with lots of different models, and there's obviously a lot of competition in that space. But that's like showing up with an engine and then handing it over to a customer and saying, okay, go build your own car. Good luck, right?
Yes.
And so I think the shift in the value in AI is really going to be around how it gets built into products. And that's really, what my job is running the software networking group at IBM. How are we taking AI and creating new products that really take advantage of AI in all the places. Now, and I'll give you an example in a completely different space. If we think about how AI is being used by Adobe or Apple or Google to manipulate photos and so on, right? Those things go in a really simple work stream and an effort to get a picture with the fantastic things you can do with AI in it. You don't have to know a model, you don't have to program it, you don't have to even think about it, right? It's just magical as a user. So we want that same experience in a business context for how AI is applied. And so what that means is that we want to apply AI as data is being collected. And that's important because we think a lot of vendors are thinking about AI, about how you apply it to an existing data lake. So let me go kind of take in the data that you've already got and go add some AI layer to it. We actually think there's a lot of inferencing of things that need to take place as the data is being collected. So that's kind of one aspect of it, the collection piece. The analytics side, really, it's not just about one thing. And what I mean by that is, everybody's using LLMs for, that's the magic, right? But the reality is there's a lot of other technologies that are really important that go and support that. So as an example, LLMs are really bad at understanding time and what happens over time. And that kind of makes sense, right, if you think about it, right? Because we're using LLMs to think about English or written content, right? And be able to ingest it and tell us more things. But to understand what happened over time. So if you think about it from a network context, if you don't know the difference between what happened 2 minutes ago versus a week ago versus a year ago, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen next or understand change over time. So with IBM Research, we've released time series models. Much, much smaller. And they kind of have time as the kind of first most important, the prime element of how data is processed. And what that means is we can take those much smaller models, which are much cheaper to train, much cheaper to manage, and much cheaper to run inferencing on, and then use them to make predictions about what the network's going to do, or identify problems because we see changes over time. Now, we're applying it to networking, but you can imagine that being applied to all kinds of things, right? So, for example, when is a machine likely to fail? When you listen to the acoustics of it for days, weeks, hours, years, you kind of get an understanding. So these time series models are really important. We released one last March, April time, a year ago, I guess almost now, called Tiny Time Mixer. We open sourced it, we pushed it into Hugging Face. It's been downloaded over 500,000 times now. So there's this kind of crying need, if you like, to go apply very different mechanisms for things, right? But again, that's just the engine. So for us to just ship an engine and say, hey, isn't this great? You could apply this to networking. So by then taking that as one layer of the analytics in the network, and then also saying, well, we need to understand topology. How are we going to learn topology? So we're using graph type methods and other things that. So I guess my point is there are many, many mechanisms that come together when you deliver a product built from the ground up to use AI than when you just say, hey, I'm going to add an AI layer that adds a chatbot to the existing data you've got. That to us isn't really value, right? But unfortunately, it's where many, many vendors, particularly in the networking space, are coming from, because they don't have this deep understanding of the different methods of AI and technologies, or the ability to do primary research on it to make that happen. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. So I guess it also continues to the automation layer, right? So you're going to use the models to actually basically feed inputs into your automation engines. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so let's just say that you've kind of used the analytics and it's identified that you need to stand up some more load balancers to account for the increase of traffic load that's coming into your infrastructure. Well, now you need a plan for how you're going to do that. Maybe they're in one of the cloud services in AWS, maybe they're in your own infrastructure, maybe they're in a kube cluster, who knows, right? But what we want the AI to do, based on the documentation that you already have, that you've written or your vendors have produced for you, is to then write the plan out and say, this is what you need to do. So go stand up 2 new load balancers, put them in the infrastructure, and you can see that as English instructions. We then take those English instructions that have been generated from LLM and then turn them into what's going to be essentially a low-code, no-code execution script, essentially to go execute those changes. So go stand up the servers, go install the load balancers, go configure them, go make all that happen, and call what might end up being a dozen or more different APIs in sequence to make that happen. Now, there's a lot of questions around whether machines should be trusted to do all of that. Certainly in the first instance, right?
Yep.
And so from our perspective, we want to be able to show our customers, here's what's going to happen, here's the order in which it's going to happen, and do that in a way that our customers don't have to understand how to configure a firewall rule, for example, but they understand that a firewall rule that looks like this is going to be applied into that cloud environment. And so through that, we're turning relatively junior folks into experts by providing the insight that they need to go get their jobs done. And that's where the kind of human to AI interaction starts becoming really interesting, because we're the kind of expert on the shoulder, if you like, to provide that level of expertise. But also there's a cross-check that says, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? I don't know why we would want to make that firewall rule change. Let me ask it a different question and refine the changes that it suggested that be made based on my own knowledge of that, which the AI might still be learning around, right? So there's a kind of really interesting dynamic that plays out there.
Yep, really amazing insights. I wanted to ask regarding the definition of GenAI in network management. Sometimes, say you have a regular AI functionalities in your perhaps one of your networking functions, and then you slap on the LLM feature, which allows, like what you say, regular folks to actually troubleshoot, to learn, to investigate things, and also to generate a lot of stuff. Does that qualify that solution now to be a Gen AI solution? just
Well,
because you have an LLM slapped on
I
it.
know, and that's why I say I think there's a difference between saying I'm adding an LLM to the interface. There's a lot of what I call kind of reskinning of GUI interfaces with chat interfaces. So instead of pointing and clicking and saying do this or writing a script, I can now type stuff and ask the same thing. But I'm not getting any more depth necessarily than
Exactly,
I would
exactly.
have through the GUI interface, right? So what we're saying, and certainly the products that we're designing and building, are really focused on the end-to-end piece of it. Here's a task that I need to do. That task is emanated from understanding a particular problem that's been identified or predicted to occur. And here is what we think, or the AI thinks you need to do to go resolve that. That's very different to a Q&A session with a chatbot, right?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. And I guess that's where the biggest value of Gen AI is, especially in management of networks, right?
Correct. When it's applied in combination with a variety of different technologies that play out with this. So for us, for example, as IBM, we acquired a company called Pliant in March last year that is designed around next generation workflows for infrastructure. So with hundreds of different integrations, it already knows how to open a ticket or pull a ticket from ServiceNow or any of the different types of systems. It also knows how to publish a firewall rule into AWS or a Palo Alto device or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
So we're kind of taking these ground fundamental technologies, which are actually anchored not in AI, but just good practice and network management, next generation network management tools, and then saying, in a workflow where AI is run, how would that apply and what would we need to do to go change the product to make that happen? So it is possible to kind of re-engineer products that haven't necessarily been done for AI, but you have to think about the context end to end, about the workflow and the business use case that we're driving, right? So,
Brilliant.
right, but I think that also comes down to what are we actually trying to do with these tools? So it's one thing to say I'm going to make it easier for my network community to be able to do tasks. I think it's quite different to say, as a consequence of implementing this solution, we're going to massively reduce mean time to resolution, like the time it takes to go fix something, from hours to minutes as a consequence of this. And in addition, the time between incidences is going to grow massively, i.e., how often you have these problems, because we're going to predict them and see them ahead of time. And that's the kind of outcome that prevents a bank being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because nobody can see their bank balance, for example,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a telco from having a major outage during the Super Bowl this weekend, for example.
Yep. Brilliant. So, zooming into the Gen AI applications, which area do you see CSPs showing most interest in terms of applying it? And, in terms of rollout rates or deployment rates, do you see them taking off in a big way soon?
Yeah, so I mean, we see most telcos, and in fact, one of the reasons I'm here in Japan, very focused on how they can apply AI. I think there's as many use cases as there are people you talk to. This is kind of one of the issues, right? We might talk to one telco who thinks that going after the advertising market with insights about their users would be
Yep.
particularly interesting. So what we've ended up doing is kind of focusing on a couple of use cases which we think have the most impact. And we started with what I would call day two operations, because we think that as I say, avoiding being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal is always a good thing, but also from an OpEx perspective, right? If you have this operational efficiency that you can get by saying, I can now reduce the cost of an outage because I'm not breaking all my SLAs. I'm also using my network more efficiently because I know and can predict when it's going to break or when it needs to be upgraded, or, to my earlier example, when you need to add more load balancers, firewalls, etc. That is a very, very kind of different outcome. And the other thing, it sounds obvious, but it's not always true in the conversations we're having. We're kind of re-anchoring the conversation on applications. And let me kind of qualify that. So when a customer calls up a CSP and says, I have a problem. They don't say, I think the backhaul capacity from the cell site's gone over, and
Yep.
I'm having a poor experience, right? They say,
Yep. Yeah.
Facebook is slow right now, or I can't
Yep.
post on X or whatever it happens to be. And so there's a kind of, how do you connect the application story or problem that the customer's describing with a network, and what that might look like? And so one of the real key, and it's a data use case, but absolutely critical, is to drive that customer satisfaction piece up by saying, yeah, I know why your Facebook experience is poor in Osaka right now, and we are fixing it, and you should expect it to be resolved in the next 30 minutes. I mean, what a great outcome, right? Versus what usually happens, and I've sat in call centers, and it's kind of quite scary. Somebody calls them, says Facebook's slow, and I've actually seen the support person pull up their phone and look at Facebook and go, well, it's working for me right now. I mean, how crazy is
Yep.
that? So
Yep.
we have to be able to apply it into things that have meaningful impacts directly, and those kind of data use cases play out before we get to some of the future ones around, say, day zero. Like, how do you plan for building out a network infrastructure? How do you optimize cost and capex build out? Where should you build first? What should you do? Your capacity. I think one of the challenges we're seeing in the CSP market is that we haven't seen the diversion of capital yet into
Okay.
AI. So to your point around, is it happening or is they doing? Well, they're still so focused on 5G build out, and just putting infrastructure in place, that they're talking a good game, but they're not making the investments that we actually think are going to be necessary. So, and still what might be a relatively small amount of capital, like 5% of their capex budget, starts to go into AI projects, we're not going to see the outcomes that the telcos need. Further, there are two challenges that kind of are a precursor to getting AI working properly in CSPs. One is that they have to have the data collection mechanisms in place, right? So you think of it as a three-legged stool, right? If I don't have data collection done, and I don't have automation tools, then when I add AI to that, if I just add
Yep.
AI and I don't have those two things, the stool falls over, right?
Yep.
So a lot of the conversations we have are around, how are you getting ready for AI and building these things, in sequence, so that you've got what you need. From an IBM's perspective, and a lot of the acquisition and activity that I've done as a group within IBM over the last 4 years since we started has been around having the technologies that are the building blocks for these things. So we acquired SubOne that collects all this data and provides performance of applications linked to networks, so we can understand those things, and then being able to automate. And so as we build the AI capabilities in the collectors of SubOne, as an example, we're not ending up with petabytes of data, because we know how to filter and manage the collection of that and get the results we need early on, so that you're not storing data just because you might need it in a few years' time. That doesn't make any sense. We're getting the answers we need as we collect it. And so the fidelity of the information is very, very sharp right from the collection point.
Okay, like you rightly pointed out, having the data collection infrastructure as well as the automation infrastructure is vital before you plug in the AI engine, so that it has data to work with, right?
Right.
And then it also has a task to complete with whatever findings that it makes. So and you just explained how IBM takes care of the data collection part. So in that sense, do you think CSPs are ready to provide the kind of data from their systems, or are they do they have issues like regarding privacy and confidentiality and stuff like that? And also, is their collection infrastructure, like you have to collect traffic information, subscriber information, lots of stuff. Do they have like a comprehensive mechanism in place to support whatever data that you guys would need?
Right. So for the second part of your question, I think it very much depends on the CSP or the telco, and they're all very, very different in different places. We have some customers who, for the last decade have had the ability to capture any packet across the network anywhere, deep insights all the way through, and they've kind of based the quality of the network on that. and there are others that are kind of just very, very light, and I think it's all over the map. It's not even country based, so it's kind of there. So and it's obviously one of our first criteria. But to the sharing question, I think that's really interesting, because obviously there's a lot of PII that's all there, and if it's not PII, it can be source. You can kind of understand it. So you might not know the name of the person or even the ID
Yep.
of the phone,
Yep.
but you could pick patterns from things.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, there's a lot of kind of proprietorial nature of the data, meaning that the CSPs don't necessarily want to share it because they don't want to allow vendors to use it to
Yep.
train their own models and then sell it elsewhere.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, so the model that we've come down to, which seems to be gaining traction, and I think we're just going to see this as standard, right, is that we're saying we're going to give you models that are pre-trained, and we've worked with the vendors that you have to pre-train the models and so on. But then for the additional training, such as we need it, it's going to be in your environment with your data. Now we can run that as a SaaS as a service, but it's going to be in something that it's your data, you own it, you keep it. It might be on the hard disks in our environment, but it's entirely in your purview and control, right? No different to how a CSP might use AWS for their services, right? So that's kind of one model. We do have customers who will only do things on premise, and that's fine too. So for us, it's about bringing the AI to the data, and not the data to the AI. And by the way, that's just a common theme with how IBM is managing AI for its customers. Because the other part and the other challenge with it is that if you start moving petabytes of data around the world, you get a delay, obviously,
Yep.
from the time you transmit it to the time you need it. Now, that brings up another important point, which is that a lot of the AI that's been applied is being applied to data at rest, meaning the data's already been collected. It might be hours, weeks, months old by the time AI runs on it. And where we actually need to be, and hence the importance of being on-prem with at least the collectors, is that you're doing this in real time and it's streamed, right? And it's not batched, right? So even if you batch in 10-minute or 30-minute increments, it's not enough to be able to say, I know I've got an outage, or an outage is about to occur, or even turn on more capacity because I've seen 100,000 folks show up at a stadium somewhere, right? That's the kind of real-time nature that kind of does push back on local processing to a level of this data.
Wow. Okay. So, last year you guys collaborated with GSMA, on watsonx, the platform.
Yeah.
So, do you want to share more details about that, and also some of the use cases that watsonx is helping operators to deploy?
Yeah, I mean, there's been obviously fantastic collaboration with the GSMA and with the GSMA members. And our initial aim with the GSMA was to, as much as anything else, was to educate, right? But not educate specifically around IBM, but around AI, particularly the use cases, how you would go about it, and what you would do with it, right? A lot of the early use cases, and I can say that because AI is moving so fast, like a year ago is early relatively
Yes.
in this, right? I think we're more around, some of the what are the quick wins you could do with AI? Can you provide a chat interface for your customers or consumers or businesses to ask questions around the service or their bill? And so they were kind of, let's call them some lightweight things before we get into the more meaty, how do I use it to reduce operational costs? How do I use it to reduce the downtime of the network? All of these more complicated things. And so we've seen CSPs kind of get this kind of two types of journeys. There's the, I want to do this myself and build the technology. I think this is so important that I have to own it. And I'm going to choose the model. I'm going to my early analogy, build my own car. I'm going to pick the engine. I'm going to pick the wheels. I'm going to, and for that, watsonx is a perfect environment to go do that. In the sense that we are allowing our customers to come in, pick different models, not just IBM models, but any of the models that you want. Go run it on data and see what results you get. And so it allows this experimental environment, which allows our customers to then go build their own products around AI. And that can play out obviously with the CSPs directly. It can also play out in a consulting engagement. But that's not what my group's about. My group is about building products. And so the next phase of that, as we say, is to say, well, how do you show up with a completely built car that is, fit for purpose to go take you to the destination you need to get to for the business case that you set out to go to. And that's really to kind of locking in of, as we say, kind of a dozen or more different technologies and methods to get a complete outcome. So, as I say, the GSMA engagement was very much about how do we ensure people were on a level playing field from a knowledge perspective so they can make the decisions about how much of the car they want to build and how much they want to buy. And I think that's kind of been a lot of the work that's been done. And so far with all of the workshops, engagements we've done, I think I'd say together with GSMA we've leveled, we've removed the hype and kind of focused on what's the reality of actually going to do this.
Okay, great insights. You just, I think we talked about, issues on the privacy issues and PII kind of data, and the complexities in data collection and stuff. What other challenges, CSPs might face in implementing GenAI as well as AI in their systems?
Yeah, I think it's about focus, meaning with all of the use cases, all the things you can do, for each of them, and I think this is a CTO function, is identify the most impactful things and the time frame with which implementation would apply, right? So let's just say you want to do something, but there's no solutions on the market. It might be the most important thing, but you're not going to be able to do it for 2 years. Other things, so you kind of then cross correlate with this is the next most important thing I want to do, and there's technology and capabilities for me to go do that. And as I say, there needs to be a board level discussion around CapEx diversion to go make that happen. We've had CSPs make very strong statements about reducing operational costs over the next 5 years as a consequence of deploying AI, but we're not seeing the movement. Lots of talk, not so much activity, right? And I think part of that is this build versus buy, build the car, buy the car discussions that are going on. But it is really time for the CSPs to go make those decisions, start applying capital into it, right? I think also just because the market is moving so quickly, a decision that might seem right today might appear very wrong in 6 months' time. And so we've kind of got this, fear of stepping into the water, if you like, because you don't know what temperature or conditions the water is going to be at, by the time you get waist deep. Now, I'd argue it does not mean that you shouldn't go down you shouldn't get in the water, because you have to as a business if you're going to remain competitive, if you're going to solve all these problems we've been talking about. So it's kind of that, it's time to commit, right? And I think there are going to be vendors that are going to be able to execute that full path for CSPs, and there are going to be vendors that are making lots of promises, but the AI is only ever going to be skin deep. And so we're seeing right now a lot of what I call kind of paper comparisons, but that's not the same as actually getting to the data and putting the data through its paces with vendors. And I think that's the phase that we're pushing our customers to get to, in the first half of this year. Go try this, right? Go put data through this. Do you get the output you think you're going to get? Is this insightful enough that it's going to increase the time between instances or reduce the time to resolution? And if you focus on those things, then I think we will get movement, right? So as we go into Mobile Congress in a few weeks from now, then that's really going to be the message we're going to be taking to that event.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So talking about Mobile Congress, I'm sure that we will see the Gen AI race intensifying. There's going to be a lot of talk about it. Do you foresee it unleashing some new trends, especially around AI and Gen AI? Like, for example, will there be like a big business around test and training data? Will people want to buy test and training data, so that they can develop better models? Or will there be like some trends around pre-trained models, like CSPs wanting to acquire these pre-trained models, and then there are vendors who supply these models? Do you see things like that taking place?
Well, the way I see it for this show, I think every vendor who is going to be at GSMA, at the Mobile Congress, is going to be there with an AI solution of some description. The issue we see with all of the hype that's going to be there is that every vendor will be focused on how that data is going to apply to their products, right? So if you make firewalls for a living, you're going to show up with an AI solution that helps to manage your firewalls or your routers or your mobile network, right? What's important are the vendors, and the things to watch for are the vendors that are able to manage across domains, right? Across vendors, because the only way you're going to be able to understand what's broken in your network, how you fix or how you reduce costs, is to understand the holistic view end-to-end across that infrastructure. And so kind of separating the wood from the trees, if you like, as folks head to the show, is like, well, am I just looking at something that's a chatbot that's landed on top of a network management system for a proprietary vendor, or am I looking at something that can holistically get into my network and manage it end to end? And so there will be few vendors like IBM with that story. There will be many vendors with an AI skin. And that's what attendees at this show are going to have to figure out how to separate.
All right. Okay. Great, Andrew. I think we learned a lot today, and somehow we are now at the end of our session. So thank you a lot for joining us, for your time, and for explaining all these new concepts, exciting concepts indeed. And of course, we look forward to seeing your showcases at the upcoming MWC as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Tara. It's been a great 30 minutes. Really enjoyed it.
Okay. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for listening. If you want to learn more, visit www.ibm.com and follow us for more updates and insights as we uncover the latest in technology and telecommunications. See you guys in our next session. Bye-bye.